Hello, hello, welcome back to Let's Talk HP Lovecraft, doing your Friday edition of Let's Talk HP Lovecraft with another short story review for you. Before we get started, just want to remind you to please subscribe to our channel and help us continue to grow. Our goal is to hit 750 subscribers before the end of the year. We are now at 516, and we're clicking off a couple every single day, so you should be the next. Alright, today's review is of The Tree, which is a short story by HP Lovecraft. Published in October 1921 in the Tryout, which is an amateur publication, one of the many amateur publications that he published in. Story is about 3 pages long, so it's a short one. It begins with the epitaph, Fata viam inventient, which means fate will find a way. This story, unlike many others of his, it's not set in fictional New England or any place like that. It's actually set in a sort of historical ancient Greece, and it takes place on the slopes of Mount Menelaus in Arcadia and centers around a villa and an olive grove. The narrator is an old beekeeper who is telling the story to someone who is obviously recording it, and he tells him about this gigantic olive tree that stands in these old ruins, and how the olive tree has been there for ages, and it seems to be really gnarled and twisted and also strangely humanoid. But then he goes on to tell the story of its origins, which begin with 2 sculptors named Kalos and Mucides, who lived in the nearby villa. Both men are sort of celebrities in their day, and they're known for their works of art. They are both sculptors. But they are different temperaments. They're not the same guy by no means. One, Mucides is, he's like a people person. It said that he loved the nightlife, and he loved to be out partying and being with people and engaging, whereas Kalos preferred the solitude of his olive grove, where he would often spend hours just relaxing, meditating, and possibly convening with the sprites and naiads and fairies and deities of a sort of mythical, quasi-mythical ancient Greece. The 2 men are commissioned by a leader called the Tyrant of Syracuse to each sculpt their own version of Fortune, who is portrayed as Tyche in this case. But his symbolism, I'm assuming it means he's one of the muses or the fates. The idea here is that each man will make their own separate version of the statue, working alone but also in conjunction. The hope here is that these 2 friends, the hope of the tyrant is that they will compete with one another, resulting in a more beautiful statue than could have been conceived of alone. Through competition, the tyrant kind of hopes that by setting the 2 people against each other, although they are good friends, that somehow it will lead to a superior product and their friendship be damned. So the work goes on in secret, at least to the outsiders who don't see it, but they do see each other's work. But during the process, Kalos falls ill, and as a result of his growing sickness, his friend Mucides becomes depressed, and then the villagers start to notice this. Although Mucides is becoming depressed, Kalos is actually sort of achieving a state of serenity, like he's come to grips with his possible coming death, and he doesn't seem to be too concerned. When Kalos is near death, Mucides promises that he will build him the most grand marble sepulcher to mark his place of burial and to honor him in death. Kalos appreciates this, but he asks that when he is buried, that he be buried with a series of twigs from 2 separate olive trees from his favorite olive grove, and that they be placed near his head. So Kalos, he eventually dies and is buried as requested with the olive twigs. Very, very soon after, an enormous olive tree sprouts out through the burial chamber and grows at an enormous rate to become this massive, gnarled, twisted thing, which the beekeeper was referring to at the beginning of the story. But 3 years pass. In the meantime, Eucides finishes his own statue, and the tyrant of Syracuse's men are on their way to come take it. They arrive at the village, but there's a storm, and they spend the night in town before going up to the villa to get their prize, essentially. But there was a windstorm. It flattened the villa. It knocked a branch of the olive tree down, and it breaks Eucides' statue into pieces, and Eucides himself has vanished. The people, they want to honor Eucides and his sacrifice and his legend, and as a result, they decide to build a temple commemorating him there near the olive tree. The old beekeeper says that in present times, or at least his present time, that it's said that if you listen closely during the wind, you can hear the wind passing through the trees, the leaves of the olive trees, and that they can be heard saying, I know, on the breeze, which is, in this case, meant to be an answer to the beginning epitaph, which was that fate will find a way. And that is your story. Quick analysis here of the tree. It's quite different than a lot of Lovecraft's other stories that I've read so far. I've read about half of his fictional output. It's different in that it's set in this very realistic setting. This is ancient Greek. It is Greece. It is convincingly ancient Greece up until the point when you realize you have this tree growing at the alarming rate, and there's a little bit of you can't have a Lovecraft story without anything supernatural, I think, and there definitely is that last little bit of supernatural tying things together. But the story, the artist, the sickly artist, Kalos, kind of reminds me of Lovecraft himself, who was said to have been a sickly, introverted person with some disdain for the worldliness of Eucides, the other sculptor. So it really speaks to Lovecraft's own personality, although I don't like to rely too heavily on the biography of a author when judging their works. There definitely are some similarities here. One of the themes of the story here is that when you create art, any artist hopes that their art will live on forever. And it's interesting because here we have the ancient world. There are still ruins of ancient Greece available to us today, but here we have this ancient olive tree that is itself still standing organically, and that there's the old sort of tale about how, given enough time, a tree roots can break through rock, and I think it sort of what the message is here is that the organic always wins out over the inorganic, and that if your art can somehow be more organic, it is bound to last longer. The implication, of course, in the story is that this tree has a little bit of magic in it. When Kalos was spending his time in the grove during his life, there were hints that maybe he was convening with Pan and some of the other woodland creatures. So there also is that sense that there might be some divine inspiration to what he is creating, which is another aspect of art, that idea that all artists have where, this one just came out of nowhere, just popped into my head, A lot of what art is craft, but there's also that outlying sense of inspiration that you can't always explain where it came from. Another theme, immortality. As I was touching on earlier, Kalos gets to live on, obviously, as part of the tree, and the tree still stands even when the villa is in ruins. So he has sort of effectively found a way to make his art immortal, and he himself be part of the art. And even should that tree die, it could have offspring that live on and live on. Last little bit here. There are some analysis that I've read claiming that they think Kalos and Eucides were homosexual, and that therefore Lovecraft himself must have been a closet homosexual. I disagree. I think that is 2019 culture talking. It's revisionist. There were certainly many artists who actually were closeted gay people who we have revealed over the years as things become more socially acceptable. But in this case, I think what the two sculptors who are obviously living together, working together, and are close friends, I think what they represent is two different types of artists and people. One is the extrovert who sort of creates pop art and sort of does it for the fame and revels in the fame, and that is sort of they're loved and adored by millions and millions of people, and possibly by more people than a serious artist. But at the same time, their work is a little bit shallow. It's a little bit face value. Whereas the second artist is the underground artist, the introvert who toils away in secret, in solitude, but their work has more soul, and ultimately it's going to survive the test of time better than the piece of pop art, which will become eventually out of style. And I think, if I can speak for Lovecraft, I think it's fair to say that he would have wanted his work to be immortal, and it's actually proving something like that. He's a guy who made no money from his work, or only pennies from his work in his lifetime, died young, and a century later almost, he has become an essential part of the American horror literary canon. He's growing in reputation, and his importance is finally being accepted and realized, and it's growing yearly as more readers and more scholars discover it and comment on it, like I'm trying to do here. All right, guys, that is my thoughts on The Tree from HP Lovecraft. Hope you're still watching. If you are, give this video a thumbs up. Please subscribe and tune in again tomorrow for my next review. I am going through the complete fiction of HP Lovecraft one by one, doing all 60 or so stories that he published in his lifetime and a few after, and giving them some attention. All right, guys, thanks again, and see you soon.